Hey my dudes, my name is Cecilia and welcome to Bageriet Lördag, the Saturday bakery. For those of you who are new here, Bageriet Lördag is my bakery that I run from right here in my apartment in Stockholm, Sweden. I sell pastry boxes and each box contains 4 different pastries. This week is going to be crazy. First of all, Saturday is Cinnamon Bun Day, Kanelbullens dag. Yes, it's real, and yes, it is a very, very big deal. So to celebrate, of course, I had to do an all cinnamon bun menu. Here's what I'll be making this week. Kanelbullar, which are Swedish-style cinnamon buns. American cinnamon rolls with a cream cheese frosting. Kanelbulladrömmar, which are Swedish dream cookies with cinnamon and vanilla. And last but not least, kanelgifflar, Swedish cinnamon crescents. And on top of that, because I'm an absolute crazy person, I have also taken on a wedding cake order. Now, I don't usually do wedding cakes or any special cake of any kind. They are so much work and so stressful. But my old boss called me and was like, hey, my friend is getting married. Will you make a cake for him? And I really like my old boss. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. So I also have to make a cake this week. But let's just get into it and see how it goes. Wednesdays are all about prep. As Cinnamon Bun Day is Saturday and I'm doing an all bun menu, I spent all my time today scaling out, buns. I started with the Swedish cinnamon buns, kanelbullar. I'm making 4 batches of dough. It's going to be really interesting to see how my Ankersrum mixer handles all of this dough. It's a really strong machine, but that's still like a lot of dough. Once the dries and the butter were scaled out, I put all those bowls on the speed rack and scaled out the yeast and milk. I know this seems kind of silly, like why move it from one container to another, but it really does help speed things up. The yeast and the milk obviously live in the fridge until they are used, but the butter needs to sit out so it stays soft. It's really annoying working cold butter into a dough. Then I scaled out for the filling. I had some plain butter filling left over from last week when I fixed the week before that's butter, sugar, misscaled cookie dough mess. I was, however, missing 400 grams, so I topped up with more butter and sugar and added the cinnamon as well, and I'll mix that all tomorrow. Then I started scaling out for the American cinnamon rolls. I had officially run out of bowls at this point, so I had to scale everything in the smaller containers we have. I get a lot of questions about these. We buy them from Fivara, which is like the Swedish version of the Container Store, but online, and I looked it up and they're called like Smart Store Frozen, which I thought was weird since I don't think they're made by the brand Smart Store. Honestly, Axel has bought them. He really likes them, and the containers that I really like are really only available for restaurants to purchase in bulk. Like we would have needed to buy boxes of like 100 of each size, and that's just crazy. Plus, these ones come in more sizes and are really sturdy, but that's all I have to say about that. The most annoying thing though is that I had to split the flour into 2 containers, which is just inviting mistakes, so I had to scale really carefully, like I always do, but I just really need some more large containers. Anyways, I put those all away, and the last thing I did, as usual, was fold boxes. I sold 103 pastry boxes this week. Insane, by the way. So exciting, but wow, what a lot of boxes that meant I had to fold. Once I was done with all my Bageriet Lördag prep, I dove right into wedding cake prep. The first thing I got started with was chopping hazelnuts, as the flavors for the cake were caramelized hazelnut and chocolate. I chopped them finely and got to work on the cake batter. I used my favorite chocolate cake recipe and mixed everything together in my largest pot. The cake is 3 tiers, so it's a lot of batter. At the very end, I mixed in the hazelnuts and then put the batter to the side while I got my pans ready. Yes, I know I should have gotten my pans ready first, but I forgot. I did 3 layers for each tier, and each layer had its own pan. Thank God. Each pan was sprayed with spray fat and then lined with parchment, and then I brushed all of them with a layer of cocoa pan release. I was not about to have any sort of sticking, thank you very much. The tier sizes were 10-inch, 8-inch, and 6-inch. That's 25 centimeters, 20 centimeters, and 15 centimeters for those of you who don't speak freedom units. The first round got placed in the oven, and while those were baking, I moved on to the caramelized hazelnuts. I decided to do them using what I call the restaurant method. This is where they get cooked in sugar syrup and then deep fried. I've only ever seen savory cooks do this, so in my mind it's not like a real pastry technique, and I would have dragéed these like a good pastry chef, but I find dragés can get a little smoky sometimes, and I have a really sensitive fire alarm in my apartment. So the nuts got cooked in a simple syrup until the syrup was super thick and syrupy, and then the syrup was strained off and the nuts left to cool. While they were cooling and more cakes were going in and out of the oven, I made a dark chocolate namalaka. This is kind of like a ganache, except it has gelatin and way more cream. It starts by making a ganache with dark chocolate, glucose, milk, and gelatin, and then a lot of cold cream is added, and it is set overnight in the fridge. I love namalaka. I think they're really easy to make and super versatile. Then it was Swiss meringue buttercream time. I'm going to be honest with you guys and tell you that I I have made a tiered cake exactly once in my life and it was a disaster, so I truly had no idea how much buttercream to make. I made 4 batches but bought in the ingredients for 6 because I was just so unsure about how much I was going to need. The buttercream needed to be white, it's for a wedding, so duh. So I just added a little bit of vanilla extract for flavoring. Once the SMBC was done, it was time to fry the nuts. The oil gets taken to 170 degrees Celsius and you just throw in all the nuts in there and stir like crazy so nothing settles to the bottom and sticks. As soon as they were looking golden, I started scooping them out. They need to be taken out a shade lighter than you might think because they continue to brown a little bit once they're out of the oil. I spread them all out and sprinkled them with salt before placing them on a speed rack to cool. The last thing I had to do was wrap all of my cakes in plastic. They came out of the pans super easily, which was the whole point. I wrapped them all really well so they wouldn't dry out and left them on the speed rack. On Thursday, I started the day off by mixing up the first round of bun dough. All the ingredients went into the mixer, and once that was started, I pushed it to the side and got some small things done. I mixed together the filling for the Swedish cinnamon buns, then cracked and mixed a bunch of eggs for egg wash. Lastly, I boiled some brown sugar simple syrup to brush on the buns after they come out of the oven. At this point, the first round of dough was done. It was smooth and elastic and passed the window pane test. This means that I can stretch it so thin I can almost read through it, like a window pane. The first dough got put away and the second round went into the mixer. I did a bunch of dishes off camera. By the time that was all done, the second round of dough was good to go, so I put that in the fridge, started the third round, and began rolling out the first. I had put the dough in the fridge to rest it. The gluten needs to relax and the dough is easier to work with if it's slightly chilled. The butter in it sets up a bit and makes things easier to roll out. Warm dough can be sticky and very floppy, and that just makes a mess. Letting it rest avoids this issue. It also helps prevent any proofing. With buns, you want them to rise or proof. I use those two words interchangeably. The yeast eats the sugar in the dough, it farts out gas, and the whole thing begins to lift, and that lift is held in place by a network of protein strands we call gluten. Like all things in life, you can really nerd out on this, but that's the basics. But basically with buns, we want them to not ferment and to rise as quickly as possible. We want a lot of lift for that fluffy, soft texture, but we don't want any fermentation because we don't want any sour flavor, just sweet butteriness. Sourdough and whole grain flours will tell you what they want. You will often hear bread bakers say, listen to what the dough is trying to tell you. This is unnecessary with buns. Okay, so why am I telling you all of this? Because buns are all about control. You control them, not the other way around. If you want to make the dough today but bake tomorrow, sure, you can do that. You want to slow down rising, speed up rising, freeze at basically any point, sure, you can do that. You are in control. So, all that to say, to make my oven schedule work for me, I needed to make all the Swedish cinnamon buns today, fully shape them, and freeze them. I also made all the dough for the American cinnamon rolls, and that will be refrigerated until tomorrow. This way, I have one thing in the fridge and one thing in the freezer, since I know I can't fit 2 things in the fridge or in the freezer, and I don't want to kill myself working for 12 hours tomorrow. This way makes my life easier, because I am in control of the dough. It does not control me. Also, can I just take a moment to say the Ankerstrom mixer that I have is such a champ. Like, I fully did 8 back-to-back rounds of dough, like full bowl, mixed for 30 minutes for every single batch, and like no issues, no problems, no weird noises, just like got it done, easy peasy lemon squeezy. I would like to see a KitchenAid do that. Once again, once I was completely done with Bageriet Lördag stuff, I got right into wedding cake prep. Now that all the elements have been made, I can focus on building the cake. I started by getting everything ready. I chopped candied hazelnuts. I left them quite chunky, but I didn't want to leave them completely whole, and then I whipped up the namalaka until it was fluffy. Then I re-whipped the Swiss meringue buttercream. You always have to do this, and I wanted to make sure mine was really nice and smooth before slapping it on the cake, so I also heated it up a bit with a hairdryer. I started with the bottom tier. I spread a little bit of buttercream on the cake board so it would stick, and then spread on a layer of the whipped namalaka. I had made a standard size batch of nama, which gave me like 800 grams, and I had calculated how much I should spread on each layer to distribute that like evenly, but it turned out it was way too much, so I have namalaka to spare. On top of each layer of nama, I sprinkled a lot of the chopped hazelnuts, and then I piped a fat line of buttercream around the outside to hold it all in. I was a bit nervous because the cakes I make are really pretty moist, and the namalaka is pretty like wet, much wetter than say a buttercream or a ganache. This is also why you don't see me using any type of soak, and I typically don't do that. I've always kind of felt like if the cake layer is moist and the filling is moist, moist. Why are we adding moisture to the cake with a soak? Like, I totally get it with one of the aforementioned fillings as they don't let any moisture to the cake, but like having a dry cake was not going to be a problem today. I did the exact same thing on all tiers, just building and filling and stacking and crumb coating, and once all three were in the fridge, I re-whipped some more buttercream and it was time for the hard part, actually frosting the cakes. I've talked about this before, but for whatever reason, I've always had a really hard time getting my cakes completely smooth. I think I whip too much air into my buttercream, so there's like lots of little bubbles, and then I'm so scared of it melting or separating, I don't take the buttercream warm enough to get it really like smooth. I see cake girls on Instagram and their buttercream is so soft and just like a step above soupy, but it goes on so smooth. But I felt like all of these tiers were good enough for a government job, so I put them in the fridge to chill overnight. Cake pickup was 10 in the morning, so I had to get started with that first. In the morning, I took out my base tier and placed it on the final cake board. I could have done this yesterday, but it felt easier to move around on the thinner cake board yesterday. I don't know what I'm doing. Then I added the dowels. This is what actually carries the weight of the other cake tiers. Without this, once the cake was room temp, the whole thing would just collapse. I put on the second tier and then put the dowels into that and then added the top tier and adjusted a little bit. This is the inspo pic that I got from the client, so pretty straightforward piping. In the picture, there are what looked like fondant balls around the edge, so I decided to do a ruffled border with a star tip as I thought that would look better than trying to do like round dollops. Then I piped a bunch of just like dots and curved lines in like a line around each tier. I was just trying my best to copy the photo. This took a long time, but it turned out really cute, I think. Then instead of roses, I had gotten marigolds from Cube Greens here in Stockholm. They sell exclusively edible flowers and lettuces grown right here in the city, and they always have the greatest flowers for me. I just kind of went nuts with the flowers and added some leaves. I think it was pretty cute. I put it in a box to make transport easier, and then the bride came and picked up the cake, and that was that. Cake has been picked up. Let's move on to Bageriet Lördag stuff. Real quick, I want to introduce my very first employee. It's Axel. Everyone say hi, Axel. Things have been going really well with the bakery, and that success has brought new opportunities, but honestly, it has been a lot, so I decided I need help, at least for the fall. We will see how the new year shakes out, but from now until the end of the year, Axel is going to be helping me out, so you might see him in the background of my videos. Anyways, today was pretty heavy as far as workload went. I greased and lined all my trays for the American cinnamon buns and then dove right into shaping them. This dough is super buttery, so it really needs to be cold when you work with it. This was perfect because I could make the dough on Thursday, let it rest overnight in the fridge, and then first things first, roll it out in the morning. The general rule of thumb I have for buns is that they can get frozen once. So like if I had needed to, I could have frozen these blocks of dough and then defrosted them and then rolled them, or I could have rolled them, then frozen them. But freezing as a block and then as rolls is just not going to lead to a good product. No matter what stage you refrigerate or freeze at, the buns still need to be proofed before they can be baked off. Like there's no getting around that. And you can't proof them and then refrigerate them because by the time they cool in the fridge and come back up to room temperature before baking, they will get overproofed and weird. When you refrigerate the buns overnight, you're not cold proofing them. That's a sourdough bread thing and more closely related to fermentation. That's not what the buns are doing. The buns are not proofing. That's the point of refrigerating them. I made a proof box out of the speed rack by covering it in a plastic cover and then placing a pot of simmering water in there. Yeast loves a good sauna sesh. In between the American cinnamon rolls, I was also mixing up 3 rounds of giflar dough, and each of those 3 rounds got portioned into 3 pieces to make shaping easier. Once the American buns were proofed, I popped them in the oven. It's a little bit tricky timing things with this much dough and the bakes being so long. 2 trays took 30 minutes, so like the last tray I baked off was pretty darn proofed. But if you're careful and take away the bun sauna in time, the buns actually have a pretty large window of time they can be baked off in. Like I'd say a good hour, sometimes 2 if your environment is not too hot. I next made the cookie dough in my largest pot. God forbid I make 2 batches of cookie dough. This was quite an arm workout, but I got it done, and then part of the batter got cinnamon to make like a marbled effect. Axel helped me scoop all of them, which thank God, because otherwise this would have taken me forever. Then we also tag teamed rolling them, so he marbled and rolled them into a ball, and then I rolled them in pearl sugar. Then I mixed together the butter filling for the giflar and got to work on shaping them. They're shaped in a very similar way to the American cinnamon rolls, but instead of the swirl facing up, they like lay on their sides, and when they proof and bake, they kind of have this like crescent shape. Did I mention I had to do 9 of these? 9. I just kept taking them from the fridge. It felt like they never stopped. Oh, and just a quick note that all of my doughs get only 1 rise because they don't need more than that. But a lot of home recipes tell you to double rise a bun dough, and I think that's because it helps with gluten formation because home machines aren't very strong and kneading by hand sucks. The last thing I did was bake off a million trillion trays of cookies. Each tray could only have max 9 and each bake took 20 minutes and I had 110 cookies to bake off. So that was my entire evening. Can I just say, never let me make 103 boxes ever again. It was wild. And like, I was so naive because I was like, 93 was hard, but like Axel is helping me and 103 is not that much more than 93. And there's no mini cakes. Like literally all I have to do is bake off buns, which I do every week anyway. And like, that's it. Basically no decorating. It's just going to be so easy. Oh, what a fool I was. First of all, my buns were not proofed and ready to go in the morning. Axel had pulled them even earlier than usual so that they would be at like around 10 p.m. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. like normal, turn on the oven. And by the time I've done my hair and makeup, set up the filming lights and had coffee, it'll be like 5:30, 5:45 and the buns will totally be ready to bake by then. Yeah, no. So it turns out it's like cold here now, which means our apartment is cold, which means the buns didn't proof at all because it turns out buns need to be warm to proof. Crazy, I know. So I started my day by making a proof box out of the speed rack with a plastic cover and a pot of boiling water. Then I pulled the Giflar from the fridge. They're so small and proof so quickly that I don't dare take them out the night before. They come up to room temp really quickly too. The problem with those guys wasn't actually the timing but space. I needed like 10 to 12 trays each for Giflar and Swedish cinnamon buns, but if you do the math, that's like 20 to 22 trays. And my speed rack holds 18. Plus I needed some space on the rack for the boiling water. So even though I own this incredibly beautiful speed rack, I was still out of space and had trays, like everywhere. This also meant that I had to reshuffle the entire speed rack like 3 times because at first I wanted just the cinnamon buns to get some heat and then those were proofed and were waiting for the oven, so I needed just the Giflar to get some heat and then the buns were baked and I needed to just like reorganize the entire thing again. Like I got nothing else done except I just kept like moving stuff around. It was annoying. So I felt like I had no flow, even though baking off buns should literally just be like all flow and very chill. As each tray of cinnamon buns came out of the oven, I brushed them with egg and sprinkled them with pearl sugar. We did this at all the bakeries that I've worked at here in Sweden. The egg cooks on contact with the hot bun and it gives the bun a softness and shine that's really nice. Don't knock it till you try it. The Giflar was super annoying to bake off because even though I have now made them several times and I've baked like a million rounds today, I felt like every single tray had a different baking time and was baking up differently. So I had to watch them like a hawk the whole time. Just so annoying. The Giflar were brushed with egg before baking for color and then brushed with brown sugar simple syrup after baking for shine. Axel woke up and made a small batch of cookies because the very last tray got burned last night, so we had to make an emergency tiny batch this morning. At least these cookies come together quickly and easily. Then I mixed up the cream cheese frosting for the cinnamon rolls. This is a really easy frosting. It's just like cream cheese, butter, and powdered sugar flavored with vanilla and salt. We cut the buns so that they would come apart more easily, and Axel spilled the frosting onto each tray and I spread it all over. We were definitely running a bit behind, so when Matilda showed up, we really had to hustle to get all the boxes packed. We packed all 103 in like 40 minutes, which was just incredible, and we made it out to the park exactly on time. And that's it for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. And if you are interested in the recipe for the wedding cake, I have that recipe now posted on Substack, available for paid subscribers, and you can find that link in the description down below. If you would one day like to purchase a pastry box or just to keep up with all things Bageriet Lördag in general, you can follow at Bageriet Lördag on Instagram. If you want more like short form, behind the scenes vlogs, you can follow me at Cecilia.Talone on Instagram and TikTok. And for long form vlogs just like this one, as well as recipe tutorials, you can hit that subscribe button down below. I hope that you have a great week and that I'll see you around next week. Hej då!